Jy luister na Isak Du Plessis op Nuuspot.
Goeiedag en baie welkom by Nuuspot. Hier in my virtuele ateljee het ek die DA se Benedicta van Minnen. Die saak waaroor ons vanoggend gesels is Eskom en spesifiek dan ook die saak oor André de Ruyter wat op die oomblik voorskoor die parlementêre komitee, oorsigkomitee afspeel met verskillende getuienisse wat daar gelei word. Benedicta is deel van skoor en ek wil so 'n bietjie met haar gesels oor hierdie saak, want ons het nou die afgelope week het ons nou gehoor dat André de Ruyter se verslag word aanvaardig geskiet en minister Pravin Gordhan het laat weet dat hy glad nie 'n engel is nie en dat hy glad nie 'n ruiter op 'n wit perd is nie en ook nie 'n fluitjieblaser nie, maar iemand wat eintlik maar net 'n egoïs is en op 'n egoïstiese galoppie gaan, lyk dit vir my, in Pravin Gordhan se oë. Die volk staan vierkant, die oorgrote meerderheid dink ek staan vierkant teen André de Ruyter, hoewel daar kritiek teen hom is, maar die oomblik as jy iets skeef sê oor André de Ruyter, dan kap mense baie gou en baie in groot getalle na jou. So ek wil 'n bietjie die saak probeer opklaar en so 'n bietjie helderheid kry. Benedicta, this case is at score at the moment, and it's being discussed, and all sorts of reports are coming in, and we, the public of South Africa, is sitting back and we don't know what to think. Who's wrong here? Did André do something wrong? Is the minister correct? What is happening?
Ag, dankie Isak en goeiemôre. Look, SCOPA has now since 2019 been focusing very heavily on Eskom. As we know, we're now 14, 15 years into load shedding. It's not getting better. In fact, it's getting worse. You can see this morning I was reading in the Burger about stage 8 load shedding that's potentially coming down the way. So we really have a serious situation. So we have been focusing in Parliament on Eskom since before André de Ruyter became the CEO. We have done several visits to various power stations, to Megawatt Park in Pretoria. We have met with the previous board and the current board. We've had ongoing meetings with the SIU, the Special Investigation Unit, SAPS, the Hawks, as well as obviously the previous CEO and the previous CEO of Eskom, including André de Ruyter. So quite honestly, the issues coming out of his book, nothing is particularly new. This is stuff that has been discussed with Eskom previously. We are currently in the middle of a SCOPA-led investigation into Eskom, where we have, prior to his book coming out earlier this week, met with him several times, online and live. We have met with the board, we have met with SAPS, we've met with the SIU, and then, of course, the week just passed, we've met with the Minister, Mr. Pravin Gordhan. And as I said to Mr. Gordhan on Tuesday, there is a very bad South African habit of trying to blame the person bringing the message, instead of actually accepting what is being said as allegations and investigating those allegations. And I think this is another example of that. So instead of really focusing on some very serious allegations that have come up, not just from Mr. de Ruyter, but also from other aspects of this investigation, we're instead seeing a situation where the board and the minister are now trying to poke holes in what André de Ruyter should or shouldn't have done, whether or not he should or shouldn't have written a book, instead of actually saying, wait a minute, here we have a national crisis. Here we have some serious allegations. Let us investigate those allegations before we rather just call out the person who made them, so that we actually focus on what the real issues are.
So this report that's apparently full of mistakes, full of holes, but still not untrue. So what's the issue then?
Well, the issue is that allegations have been made. These allegations have on various occasions been shared at various levels with SAPS, with the minister, with various ministers actually. There have been several meetings, which Minister Jordan did not refute. They have been shared with the previous board. Professor Makgoba, who was the previous board chair, has confirmed that. So they really have been put out there. Granted, there are issues about PRECA and whether or not André de Ruyter signed the PRECA agreement, when and where SAPS might have wanted them to do so. There might be issues to do with formalities like the affidavits, potentially. Did he file an affidavit? Did he make an oral report? That kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you can't refuse to investigate allegations that are brought on the basis that you, well, to quote the chair of the Eskom board, found his comments amounted to defamation of Eskom. I mean, that is a real circular argument that simply obfuscates what the real issues are.
So you are part of SCOPA, and as you have said, you've been part of this prior to the appointment of André de Ruyter, investigating and looking into what's happening at Eskom, measured against that and the knowledge that you have. Is there anything false that André de Ruyter said?
Well, I can't judge whether it's true or false. I mean, that is the role of the law enforcement agencies to investigate. But certainly what we have seen over the last 4 years is there is enormous corruption at Eskom. Some of it is corporate corruption to do with the contracts. There are matters there that one will be familiar with, like the ABB contract with international players. There has been international court cases. There has been money repaid. Then there is the, to use the Afrikaans saying, die jakkalse en die oes, the small matters of people inflating prices at a localized level. It's not small, obviously, overall, but in terms of the bigger picture, it's a low-level corruption. And then there is what is particularly concerning, which appears to be major corruption, particularly in coal with the Cabals and Mpumalanga, which appears, certainly it's alleged that there are senior state players involved with that. Now, that is a very serious issue, because at the end of the day, Eskom as a state-owned enterprise, and with the Minister of Department of Public Enterprises as the statutory stakeholder, is something that really needs to be safeguarded for the future of the country. And instead, what we appear to be seeing is certainly a lethargy coming out of the ministry and the state, and at worst, complacency or even complicitness when it comes to major players involved with the state and with corruption. And I think those are the questions we really need to be asking.
The critics have it, especially about the fact that the ANC is being slandered by the allegations. But just the issue about Kusile, Itachi and Chancellor House, of which documents the other day came to the front, is already proof enough that at least someone in the ANC must be involved with the corruption at Eskom.
No, not at all. There have been several investigations over the years. Minister Jordan himself this week admitted that there had been state capture in the state capture period at Eskom. He would allude to the fact that this is now being dismantled, but quite honestly, I'm not seeing any evidence of that. He also admitted that Chancellor House had benefited. If one simply listens to the interview that we had with him on Wednesday at SCOPA, that is very clear. But what is concerning is that you're seeing people within the ruling party, and Minister Jordan is one of them, trying to differentiate between the good ANC, as it were, and the, to quote him, naughty ANC. Now, there really is no differentiation. It is the same party. It is the party that has been in governance since 1994. It is the party that has made bad decisions going back to 1998, not to put money into maintenance and development of Eskom. It is the same party that allowed state capture to happen. We all know about the Gupta years. And it's the same party that is continuing to essentially allow Eskom to fall into disarray and is potentially complicit in the massive state corruption at Eskom. So no, I think it is a massive issue, and it's something that South Africans really have to take it to heart and understand what's actually going on and what's really threatening their power supplies.
What is worrying about the attitude of Minister Gordhan and also the chairman of the Eskom board is that they say that they want to do away with corruption. But now someone comes to the front, shows what is happening at Eskom, and they actually tell him that he's the one on the wrong side of the track now.
That's exactly what happens. And that is very much a trend in South Africa. We like to blame the person bearing the message. And that really has to stop. It's almost as if, it's not what you say, it's how you say it and where you say it that is more important. And that, of course, is completely honest de boer, as it were. That's not how it should be. There should be allegations that are made. It should be investigated in due course, properly investigated, mind you, not just talked about, so that we can actually have faith in the legal systems, in the law enforcement systems, and in private investigations. What is interesting is the SIU, Special Investigation Unit, who has been tasked with dealing with issues in the civil sphere internally with Eskom. They then prepare evidence and, if necessary, refer it to the prosecutions. They've been very good, and they have made a lot of successes. But the problem comes in, certainly when SAP seems to get involved, there's a great reluctance to investigate. The board of Eskom is even more reluctant. I mean, they said straight to Scopa last week, allegations of corruption by senior politicians at Eskom isn't Eskom's problem, because we're not the ones who investigate it. SAPS must investigate it. Now, when you have a board that is so disinterested in what is actually happening with the organization they purportedly have oversight over, then we have a real problem.
Where do we go from here? Is there a future for Eskom?
Well, it's a very interesting question. Where are we from here? Last week, when the board was meeting with Scopa, both the minister and the acting CEO of Eskom, Mr. Kasim, were in China, ostensibly on a visit with Transnet. I don't know what the Eskom people were doing there, but they certainly appear to be having conversations with a Chinese grid company, which, if you look it up, is the third biggest company in the world. They run the grid in China. They have big investments in Portugal, in the Philippines, and various other parts of the world. The question that needs to be asked, is the state now looking at unloading Eskom to the Chinese? I mean, why was that meeting happening? What is happening with the Turkish power boats? Are they essentially going to enter into, well, they already have signed documents, into long-term, and I mean seriously long-term contracts with the Turkish company about that? What is going on? Are we seeing an attempt to sell Eskom to players abroad? There certainly doesn't appear to be much commitment to strengthening internal capacity. So I think we really are in for not only a long, cold, dark winter, but a cold future, unless this is very seriously sorted out, and soon.
Are there serious questions about whether Eskom might be sold to someone else that's not South African?
I wouldn't want to speculate too far. I wouldn't want to speculate too far at the moment, but these are meetings that have happened, and I think we need to ask the question as to why these meetings have happened. Minister Gordhan again this week said, he's not going to preempt anything, but he's hoping to make a positive announcement. Now, I think we need to know what that is. So essentially, the secrecy is a problem. The secrecy also extends, incidentally, to the interviews for the applicants to be the new CEO for Eskom. So we need to really hold the government to account as to what's going on. What we do know is that there's no real progress in terms of fixing Eskom. There's a great reluctance to use alternatives, certainly in the Western Cape. The city of Cape Town and the government of the Western Cape is preparing alternative power supplies. But ultimately, across the country, there doesn't appear to be much movement internally to repair the systems of Eskom in order to provide some power supply. So one is forced to ask the questions. What is the government planning to do?
The government is is not very well known for being held accountable.
Well, that of course is the big question. I mean, after 30 years of governance, what should we call it? Non-accountability and very much deciding to go their own way and allowing for state capture, it is very difficult to hold a reluctant government to account. There is an election next year. I think it is very important that everybody who can vote does vote. We need to have alternatives. If the ANC can be pushed below 50%, then that potentially does open avenues where change can happen. So people really need to be engaged. The days of being able to think that the government doesn't matter, that politics doesn't matter, that one doesn't actually have to take a stance is long past. People need to be involved. They need to be involved with their communities, and they need to be looking at alternatives. We saw this in the Free State with the towns that were trying to move to solar. That was stopped by the courts and by Eskom, which I think is deeply unfortunate, because at the end of the day, people are going to be forced to find alternative options for energy. That, of course, is going to have a knock-on effect to Eskom because people will be going off grid, which will place them under further pressure. So really, it's a matter of people going out there and being involved with their communities, building resilience, and when they have opportunities to vote out the government, to do so.
In your dealings with the government and Eskom, where do you see we go?
I think where we're going to be going is people who can afford to go off-grid are going to be going off-grid, which will leave people who are on-grid very often being the people who are for various reasons not able to meet the financial commitments that are required by the municipalities that provide power. I think we're going to see a situation where there is a privatization through necessity of large elements of the grid. Already you're seeing more power being produced in private hands on some days than by Eskom itself. That, of course, is a vicious cycle. So I'm not particularly optimistic about the future of Eskom in that regard. And ultimately, we're going to have to go for independent power producers. So one's going to need to have regional and provincial governments that encourage that. I think that is the only way forward at this point.
Benedicta van Minnen of the DA, thank you very, very much for talking to us and making time for us. Hope to speak to you again sometime.
Thank you, Isak.
Goed gaan.
Jy luister na Isak Du Plessis op Nuuspot.